Hello, peaceful soul. I'm your storyteller this evening, here to help you unwind and drift into a gentle, restful sleep. Before we begin our journey, remember to like the video and subscribe for more calming bedtime tales. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. And if there's a story you'd love to hear next, I'd be happy to bring it to life. My name is Delilah Moore. I worked as a night shift cashier at a McDonald's for 5 years. Our store was on a highway, a 24-hour operation. This meant we saw all kinds of people, especially late at night. Most were just tired travelers. A few were a bit drunk after leaving the bars, and some were just plain odd. You get used to it. The smell of stale coffee and cleaning products was the perfume of my life back then. It was a job where you mostly zoned out, ringing up orders, trying to keep warm in the booth. But then one person came in who didn't fit any of those groups, and what he asked for, what he kept asking for, started to chip away at my sense of what was normal. The late-night isolation was usually just boring, but after him it became something else entirely, something cold and watchful. It was a cold, rainy night in February, the kind of night where the raindrops hammered on the roof, making it hard to hear anything else. The usual late-night rush had died down. I was wiping down the soda machine, the hum of the cooling unit a familiar comfort. The floor was sparkling clean, and the air smelled faintly of lemon disinfectant. Everything felt normal, quiet, routine, just another boring night shift. Then the door chimed. I looked up. A man stood just inside the entrance. He was tall, thin, and wore clothes that were old, but surprisingly clean. No rips, no stains. He didn't have the usual look of someone who was homeless, though he clearly didn't have much. His face was gaunt, his skin pale. He had an unusual stillness about him. His eyes, though, were what caught me. They were a pale, watery blue, but they seemed to hold an impossible sadness, or maybe an impossible emptiness. They didn't blink often. He just stood there, dripping slightly from the rain, not moving towards the counter. "Can I help you, sir?" I asked, my voice polite but a little hesitant. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me with those vacant blue eyes. A shiver ran down my spine. It was an unusual stillness, a quietness that felt wrong. My instincts, after years on the night shift, were already beginning to scream that something was wrong. This wasn't just another tired or strange customer. This was different. Slowly, he walked to the counter. His movements were fluid, almost too smooth. "I would like a moment," he said, his voice soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried clearly in the quiet restaurant. "A moment of your time." My eyebrows furrowed. "A moment? Sir, this is McDonald's. We sell food." I tried to keep my tone even. I thought maybe he was confused or maybe just lonely. We did get people who just wanted to talk sometimes. He didn't react to my words. He just continued to stare at me with those unblinking blue eyes. "I need to know what you saw," he whispered again, leaning slightly over the counter. His voice seemed to pull at something inside me, a strange urgency in its softness. "What you truly saw, beyond the grease, beyond the smiles." My heart began to pound. What did that even mean? I had seen a lot of things in McDonald's, spilled fries, angry customers, even a rat once, but nothing that fit his words. "Sir, I don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just work here." He leaned closer, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly. A faint, earthy smell, like damp soil mixed with something metallic, reached me from him. "No," he breathed, the word a soft exhalation. You see the gaps, the edges, the places where things slip through. He paused, his gaze fixed on my face. I need you to tell me what slipped through here tonight. My mouth went dry. I tried to look away from his eyes, but they held me. It was like he was trying to pry something out of my head, something I didn't even know I possessed. I suddenly felt cold, colder than the February rain outside. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't confusion. This was something else. Pure, unadulterated fear started to bloom in my chest. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed. The silence in the restaurant was deafening, except for the insistent hum of the soda machine and my own frantic heartbeat. I can't, I stammered, finally breaking his gaze and looking around wildly, hoping another customer would walk in. No one did. The restaurant was empty, except for us. He smiled then, a slow, unsettling smile that didn't reach his eyes. You will tell me. Every night I will come, until you remember what you saw, until you tell me. Then he turned. Just as slowly as he had walked in, he walked out. The door chimed shut, leaving me standing there, trembling, clutching the counter. My co-worker, Vincent, came out from the back a few minutes later, asking if everything was okay. I told him it was just a strange customer, but I couldn't shake the feeling of those eyes, that soft, demanding voice. And he did come back. Every single night, just after midnight. He would stand at the counter, always in the same spot, always silent at first, and then he would ask in that same soft, unsettling whisper, "What did you see tonight, Delilah? Did anything slip through?" He never ordered food, never paid for anything. He would just ask and stare. Sometimes, when I tried to look away, I'd swear I saw a faint, dark shadow flickering behind him, just at the edge of my vision, like a ripple in the air. The terror built with each visit. I started to dread midnight. I'd hide in the back, pretending to clean, hoping he'd leave, but he'd wait, just stand there, silent, until I had to serve him. His gaze would bore into me, making me feel like my thoughts were being searched. My other co-workers noticed I was on edge. They thought I was just stressed, but they didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel the weight of his impossible questions. One night, after weeks of this, I was alone. It was especially quiet. The rain had stopped, and the air was still and heavy. He walked in, silent as always. He stood at the counter, and I felt a cold dread settle over me. "What did you see tonight?" he whispered. His voice was different this time, layered, like more than one person was speaking at once. "Did the shadow come close? Did it brush your skin?" My eyes darted to the spot behind him where I sometimes saw the flickers. And this time, it wasn't just a flicker. A deeper darkness seemed to pool there, swirling like thick smoke, taking on a vague humanoid shape. It was translucent, but I could feel its cold. It felt like it was reaching for me, trying to pull something out of my very soul. A gasp ripped from my throat. I stumbled back, knocking over a tray of napkins. "Tell me, Delilah," the layered voice commanded, growing louder, more insistent. "Tell me what you saw. Tell me what it wants." The dark shape behind him seemed to solidify, 2 pinpricks of glowing red appearing within its mass, fixing on me. The metallic, earthy smell filled the air, thick and suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I knew then that he wasn't asking for information for himself. He was a messenger, or a hunter, and I was his prey. I don't remember much after that, just a blur of panic. I must have screamed. I must have run. My manager found me huddled in the storage room, crying uncontrollably. I couldn't explain. How do you explain a man who asks for a moment, who looks for gaps, and who is accompanied by a silent, shadowy presence? I quit the next day. I couldn't go back, couldn't face midnight, couldn't face him. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I feel a prickle on the back of my neck. I feel those pale blue eyes on me, searching, and I hear that layered whisper, asking what I saw, what it wants. I still don't know what I was supposed to have seen, but I know it's still out there, lurking, waiting, and sometimes I wonder if one day he'll find me again and finally get the answer he's looking for. The horror followed me home, and it's always asking, always watching, always waiting. My name is Dominic Wells. I was a grill cook for 8 years at a McDonald's. It was a high-volume location, especially in the mornings. You learn to work fast, to handle the heat, and to manage a lot of raw ingredients. My station was the breakfast grill. Sausage patties, eggs, bacon. I knew the look, the smell, and the feel of every single ingredient that came through that door. You get familiar with the quality control, the way things are supposed to be. Most of the time it's just meat, eggs, and cheese. But there was one period, a few weeks, where things started to get really, really wrong. It was an early morning, just before the breakfast rush. The sun wasn't even up yet, and the air was still cool and dark. The smell of fresh coffee brewing mixed with the sizzling of the first sausage patties on the grill. I was humming along to the radio, flipping patties with practiced ease. The kitchen was mostly quiet, just the clatter of pans and the hiss of the grill. I opened a new bag of frozen sausage patties, ready to lay them out. Everything was perfectly normal. As I started placing the patties on the grill, one of them felt off. It was a little softer than the others, and the shape was slightly irregular, not the perfect circle it should have been. I picked it up, expecting to find a badly pressed patty, but as I turned it over, I saw it. Embedded in the grayish-pink meat, just beneath the surface, was a tiny, hard, dark object. It looked like a small polished stone, or maybe a shard of dark glass. It was no bigger than my pinky nail. I frowned, poking it with my gloved finger. My initial thought was that it was just a piece of plastic that had accidentally gotten into the mix at the factory. Happens sometimes. I shrugged, scraped it off, and threw the patty in the waste bin. Just a fluke. But my instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just a dirty patty. This was different. The next morning, it happened again. Another patty, another strange object. This time, it was a tiny, coiled piece of wire, no thicker than a hair. I found it when I was breaking up a stack of frozen patties. It glinted under the fluorescent lights. A different kind of material, but still not food. This was unusual. 2 days in a row? I started to feel uneasy. I checked the next bag of patties more carefully. Nothing. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a batch of factory rejects got mixed in. I mentioned it to my manager, Daisy, but she just said to be more careful and throw out anything that looked suspicious. She seemed busy and didn't really pay attention. The third morning, I was cracking eggs into the egg cooker. As I scooped out a finished egg, I noticed a strange discoloration. A tiny speck of dark red, almost black, embedded in the cooked white. It looked like a tiny, dried drop of blood. My stomach clenched. It was so small, most people wouldn't have noticed. But I did. My hands trembled as I carefully picked it out with the tip of a knife. It was almost crunchy. I threw the egg away, trying to tell myself it was just a bit of pigment from the shell. But a cold dread was starting to set in. This wasn't normal. This was happening too often. The unsettling events began to escalate. A week later, I found a small, almost perfectly square piece of white plastic in a hash brown patty. Then, a few days after that, in a batch of bacon, I saw what looked like a tiny gray sliver of bone. It was thin and sharp, almost like a splinter. Each time I tried to rationalize it, but the explanations grew thinner and thinner. My hands started to shake when I opened new bags of ingredients. The smell of raw meat, usually just part of the job, started to turn my stomach. I felt a growing sense of paranoia, checking every single item that went onto my grill. My coworkers thought I was being obsessive. "Just toss it, Dominic," they'd say. "It happens." But I knew. This didn't happen. Not like this. Not every day. One particularly busy morning, the breakfast rush was in full swing. Orders were flying in and I was moving as fast as I could. I tore open a fresh bag of frozen sausage patties. As I dumped them onto the grill, one patty tumbled out and landed with a wet thud on the stainless steel counter beside the grill. My eyes widened. It wasn't round. It was misshapen, oblong, and had a strange, almost grotesque texture. And then I saw it. Embedded clearly in the center of the patty, staring out at me with an awful, unblinking horror, was a tiny, glassy, black eye. It was small, no bigger than a pea, but undeniably an eye. It was set in what looked like a miniature, pale, bony socket. It looked like the eye of a very small bird, or perhaps a mouse. But it was just there, staring, and around it the meat was streaked with dark, almost black veins that pulsated faintly, as if it was still alive. A faint, sickening smell, like old blood and something metallic, wafted from the patty. It wasn't the smell of raw sausage. It was the smell of decay. My breath hitched in my throat. I froze, tongs clattering to the floor. The noise of the busy kitchen, the shouting of orders, the sizzling of the grill, all faded into a distant hum. All I could see was that eye, staring at me from the raw meat. It felt like it was alive, accusing me, knowing me. Pure, absolute terror surged through me. My stomach revolted, and I gagged, stumbling back against the wall. "Dominic, what are you doing? We need those patties," a coworker yelled, jostling me. I couldn't speak. I just pointed a trembling finger at the counter, at the patty with the eye. My coworker, Carl, looked at it, then at me. His face went pale. What is that?" he whispered, his voice shaking. We called Daisy, the manager. She came over, looked at the patty, and her face went from confusion to utter disgust. She picked it up with a gloved hand, her lips pressed into a tight line. "What the hell is this?" she muttered, dropping it into a biohazard bag. "Where did this come from?" I tried to tell her about all the other things I'd found. The stone, the wire, the blood, the bone. But the words tumbled out, incoherent, choked by panic. She just shook her head, looking at me with concern but also a hint of disbelief. "Dominic, I think you're overworked. We'll look into the supplier, but maybe you need a break." I took that break, and I never went back. I quit that day. I couldn't face the grill again, couldn't face opening another bag of ingredients. The image of that tiny black eye staring at me from a raw sausage patty is burned into my mind. I can still see it, still feel the metallic, decaying smell. I can still hear the phantom sizzle of it on the grill, knowing it was meant for someone's breakfast. I don't eat fast food anymore. The thought of what might be hidden in the processed meat, The unseen horrors that could be lurking in the things we so casually consume chills me to my core. Every time I see a commercial for breakfast sandwiches, I think of that eye. I think of the other fragments, the bits of bone and wire. What were they? Where did they come from? I don't know, and I truly never want to. But the horror followed me home, and it whispers to me from every piece of food I see, reminding me that sometimes what you don't know can hurt you. My name is Layla Parker. I was a general manager for McDonald's for 12 years. I worked at several locations, but the longest I spent was at an older store on the very edge of town. It had been there for decades. It had its quirks, as old buildings do: creaky floors, drafty windows, and the occasional flickering light. The employees even had a few playful ghost stories about a phantom fryer or whispering voices in the back. But I was a pragmatic person. I didn't believe in ghosts. I believed in faulty wiring and old pipes. My job was to make sure the store ran smoothly, and that meant solving problems, not inventing spooky tales. But there came a point when even my pragmatism couldn't explain what was happening. It was late one Tuesday night, well after closing. The last customer had left, the doors were locked, and the cleaning crew was gone. I was alone, doing inventory, counting stock in the back storage room. The silence of the empty restaurant pressed in on me. It was a comforting silence, usually, just the distant hum of the refrigerators and the occasional drip of the old ice machine. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of cleaning solution and lingering fryer grease. All was as it should be. As I was counting boxes of burger patties, I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible sound coming from the main dining area. It sounded like a soft shuffle, like someone dragging their feet on the tiled floor. My head snapped up. I froze, listening. Nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerators. I told myself it was the old building settling, or maybe the wind outside making the old sign creak. This store was notorious for its quirks, as I called them. I tried to rationalize it, to dismiss the prickle on the back of my neck. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just an old building. This was different. I continued my inventory, but I was on edge. Then I heard it again, this time clearer. A distinct thump, like a heavy object falling. It came from the kitchen. My heart jumped. I grabbed my heavy flashlight, my hand slick with sweat, and crept out of the storage room. The kitchen was dark, only lit by the faint emergency lights and the red glow of the heated holding bins. Nothing was out of place. No boxes on the floor, no fallen equipment. The silence was absolute. I walked through the kitchen, checking everything. Nothing. I went back to the storage room, trying to convince myself I was just tired. The next night, it escalated. I was closing alone again, doing the same inventory. This time, I heard a distinct whisper. It was soft, breathy, like someone murmuring right behind me. It wasn't words, not exactly. More like a sibilant hiss, a suggestion of speech that faded before I could make it out. I whirled around, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing. Just empty shelves, rows of boxes. But the air in that spot was suddenly icy cold, raising goosebumps on my arms despite the warmth of the room. It lasted only a moment. Then the warmth returned. Over the next few weeks, these incidents became more frequent, more bold. Things started to move. A mop bucket, left leaning against a wall in the utility closet, would be found upright in the middle of the room. A stack of napkins on a dining table would be scattered across the floor, as if swept by an unseen hand. The whispers grew clearer, sometimes sounding like a child's voice, sometimes a low moan, always just at the edge of hearing. I checked the security cameras religiously. They showed nothing, just empty rooms, still as death. My employees started to whisper about me, saying I was seeing things, but I knew what I was experiencing. One night, it reached its climax. I was in the office, finishing up the nightly paperwork. The building was completely dark, save for my desk lamp. The only sound was the scratching of my pen and the distant hum of the refrigerators. I was tired, my eyes heavy. Suddenly, a glass on the shelf above my desk, a promotional Coca-Cola glass that had been there for years, slowly, silently slid forward. It moved just an inch, then stopped. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at it, my heart pounding. It couldn't be. There was no vibration, no draft. It just moved. My eyes fixed on it, wide with terror. Then, with a soft, deliberate clink, it tilted, and then it pushed itself off the shelf. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore through the silence. The glass didn't shatter on the floor. Instead, it hovered in the air for a second, right in front of my face, spinning slowly. And from inside the glass, a voice emanated. It was a child's voice, high-pitched and choked, but clear as a bell. "Help! Me! Layla!" My blood ran cold. My own name. My hands flew to my mouth, stifling another scream. I could feel an intense cold radiating from the glass, as if all the warmth had been sucked out of the room. The air around it shimmered faintly, a distortion in the darkness. My eyes darted around the room, but there was nothing there. Just me, the desk, the lamp, and the hovering, whispering glass. The terror was absolute, paralyzing. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The words, "Help me, Layla," echoed in my head over and over, chilling me to the bone. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the glass dropped. It hit the carpeted floor with a soft thud, rolling harmlessly under the desk. The cold vanished. The voice was gone. The air was still. I was left alone in the silence, trembling, gasping for air. I didn't finish my paperwork that night. I stumbled out of the office, fumbling for my keys, and practically ran out of the store. I locked up, double-checking every lock, feeling an intense, unseen gaze on my back the entire time. I still work as a manager, but I transferred to a newer store in a different town. I avoid that old McDonald's completely. I never close alone anymore. The memory of that voice, of my name being whispered from inside a hovering glass, is etched into my soul. I still see that glass in my mind, spinning, whispering. I still feel the intense cold. What was it? A child? Trapped? Why my name? I don't know, and I don't want to. But I know that not everything can be explained away by old pipes or drafts. Some things are truly, horrifyingly unexplained. The horror followed me home, and sometimes when I'm alone, I still hear a faint whisper, just at the edge of hearing, calling my name. My name is Kevin Jones, and I spent 6 years working as a delivery driver for a McDonald's that specialized in late-night deliveries. Our store was in a sprawling suburban area, which meant long drives through dark, quiet streets. I got used to the solitude, the glow of the street lights, and the occasional strange encounter with a customer. My job was straightforward. Pick up the food, drive it to the address, get paid. It was all about efficiency and speed. Most deliveries were uneventful, just dropping off a burger and fries. But there was one house, on the very edge of our delivery zone, that I still can't drive past without a shiver running down my spine. The order itself was simple enough, But what I saw, or rather what I didn't see, has stayed with me. It was a cold, misty October night, the kind of night where the fog hung low, making the headlights seem weak and blurring the edges of everything. My old delivery car rattled along, the radio playing soft, familiar tunes. I had just picked up an order for a Big Mac meal, apple pie, and a large Coke. The address was out on Old Mill Road, a long, winding street with houses set far back from the road, surrounded by dense trees. The air felt thick and damp, carrying the smell of wet leaves and distant wood smoke. Everything felt normal, just another late-night delivery. I finally found the house. It was old, Victorian style with dark, peeling paint and tall, narrow windows that looked like empty eyes. The porch light was off, plunging the front of the house into near darkness. A single, weak street light cast long, distorted shadows across the overgrown yard. It had an unusual stillness about it, a quietness that wasn't quite right. My instincts, after years of strange deliveries, were already beginning to scream that something was wrong. This wasn't just a dark house. This was different. I pulled into the driveway, killed my headlights, and sat for a moment, listening to the drip of condensation from the trees. I got out of the car, the gravel crunching under my feet, the sound surprisingly loud in the thick silence. I walked up the cracked stone path to the front door, the McDonald's bag held securely in my hand. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. The sound echoed eerily in the fog. Still nothing. I peered through the dark windows, but they were too dirty, too dark to see anything inside. It felt like the house was watching me, an empty, brooding presence. I heard a faint, rustling sound from the bushes near the porch. My head snapped around, flashlight beam cutting through the fog. Nothing. Just the leaves stirred by what I assumed was a stray animal. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they fell asleep. Happens sometimes. I was about to turn around and call the store when I heard it. A soft, scraping sound coming from inside the house, like something being dragged across a wooden floor. Then, the doorknob slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to turn. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, watching it. It turned completely, then clicked. The door remained closed. My breath hitched. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. The air around me suddenly felt icy cold, cutting through my thin uniform. The metallic tang of cold, damp earth filled my nostrils, even through the smell of the food. Slowly, the door creaked open a crack, just an inch. Not enough to see inside, but enough for a sliver of utter blackness to appear. And through that crack, a voice whispered. It was dry, raspy, like old paper being crumbled, yet it seemed to fill the entire porch. "The order is ready." My blood ran cold. The order is ready? I had the order. I was the delivery driver. My mind screamed at the impossibility of it. I tried to speak, but my voice was caught in my throat. I could feel an intense pressure radiating from that dark crack, a feeling of immense, ancient hunger. It was suffocating. My vision blurred at the edges, my body shaking with a terror I had never known. I was paralyzed, utterly helpless. "Come in," the voice hissed, a barely audible command that reverberated in my chest. The crack widened another inch, and through that small opening, I caught a glimpse of something. Not a face, not an eye, just a patch of impossible, shifting darkness. It wasn't just shadows, it was an absence of light, a deeper blackness than anything I had ever seen. It swirled and pulsed within the crack, like a living void, and from within that swirling darkness, a single, skeletal hand, long and thin, reached out. It wasn't human. The skin was paper-thin and gray, the bones too prominent, the nails long and sharp. It beckoned. I screamed then, a loud, terrified yell that echoed through the misty night. I dropped the McDonald's bag. The sound of the Big Mac meal hitting the porch floor was shockingly loud. I didn't wait. I turned and ran, scrambling back down the cracked path, not daring to look back. I fumbled for my car door, threw myself inside and slammed it shut, locking it automatically. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely start the engine. I threw the car into reverse and sped out of the driveway, gravel spitting behind me. I didn't stop until I was miles away, bathed in the comforting glow of a gas station. I called the store, babbling incoherently to my manager about a ghost hand and a dark voice. They just told me to come back and not to worry about the order. They thought I was drunk or having a breakdown. I never explained what I truly saw. How do you explain a house that delivers its own order? A crack in the door that shows you pure void? A skeletal hand that beckons? I quit the delivery job a week later. I couldn't drive past Old Mill Road anymore without feeling a cold dread, a phantom touch on my arm. Sometimes, when I'm alone in my car at night, I hear a faint, dry whisper, asking for the order. I avoid dark houses, especially old ones with no lights on. The image of that skeletal hand reaching out from the impossible darkness is burned into my mind. And I know that somewhere in that old house, something is still waiting for its order. An order that isn't food. An order that requires something far more terrifying. The horror followed me home, and it still reaches for me from the shadows of my memory. My name is Miles Turner, and I was a janitor for McDonald's for almost 10 years. My duties mostly involved cleaning the dining area, scrubbing the bathrooms, and taking out the trash. The late-night shift was usually quiet. You learn the layout of the place, the way the light falls, the different smells of cleaning chemicals, stale food, and the occasional lingering perfume. Most of the time, it's just mundane work. But there was one particular night, in one specific McDonald's bathroom, where the grime wasn't the only thing that refused to be scrubbed away. It was a cold, desolate winter night, the kind of night where the wind howled around the building, rattling the windows. I was doing my usual rounds, polishing the stainless steel, mopping the floors. The McDonald's was located in a lonely industrial park, so it didn't get much late-night traffic. The silence was absolute, broken only by the whistling wind and the rhythmic slosh of my mop bucket. The air smelled of bleach and floor wax. Everything was calm, routine. I headed to the men's bathroom, bucket and mop in hand. It was a standard McDonald's bathroom, white tiles, stainless steel fixtures. Nothing out of the ordinary. The fan hummed quietly. I flipped on the light, and the fluorescent tubes flickered to life, casting a harsh, unforgiving glare. As I started scrubbing the sink, I noticed something. On the wall, just above the urinal, a small, dark stain. It was faint, almost like a smudge, but I hadn't seen it there before. It was a strange, almost irregular shape. My first thought was that a customer had spilled something, perhaps a soft drink or coffee. Annoying, but common. I took my scrubbing brush and some heavy-duty cleaner and began to scrub, but it didn't come off. I scrubbed harder, applying more cleaner, digging into the tile grout. The stain remained. It was almost like it was part of the wall, not just on its surface. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just a tough stain. This was different. I paused, respirator making my breathing loud in my ears, and stared at the dark mark. It seemed to pulse faintly under the harsh light, almost imperceptibly. I kept scrubbing, getting frustrated. This was supposed to be an easy clean, but the stain seemed to resist. It had a faint, metallic odor, like old blood mixed with something else, something sweet and sickly, like rotten fruit. The smell grew stronger as I scrubbed, making me wrinkle my nose. I finally gave up, deciding to let the cleaner soak in for a while. I moved on to the next stall. As I finished wiping down the walls, I noticed it again. Another stain. This one was larger, darker, on the back of the stall door. It was a distorted shape, like a smeared handprint, but too large, too elongated. My heart gave a jump. 2 strange, unremovable stains in one night? This was more than a coincidence. I sprayed it, scrubbed it, but it clung to the surface like glue, and the same sickening, metallic sweet odor wafted from it. Over the next few nights, the stains started to appear more frequently, not just in the men's room, but in the women's too. On the bathroom walls, on the backs of stall doors, even on the mirrors. They were always dark, irregular, and impossible to remove. Some looked like smeared handprints, others like strange, swirling symbols. Each one emitted that same terrible, sickly sweet metallic odor. My co-workers, who occasionally helped with cleaning, started to notice too. "What are these things, Miles?" they'd ask, frowning. "They won't come off." We tried every cleaning product, every technique. Nothing worked. It was like they were seeping out of the walls themselves. The bathroom started to feel colder, even with the heating on full blast. The hum of the fan seemed to take on a strange, rhythmic pulse. Sometimes, when I was alone in there, I'd hear faint whispers, not words, just a breathy, sibilant sound, like rustling leaves coming from the stained walls themselves. The hairs on my arms would stand on end. I felt watched, constantly. My managers thought I was just stressed and imagining things, but I knew. I knew what I was seeing, what I was smelling, what I was feeling. One particularly cold night, I was alone in the men's bathroom, trying a new industrial-strength cleaner on a particularly large, dark stain on the wall above the sink. It looked like a grotesque, stretched-out face, its features smeared and indistinct, but undeniably there. The sickly sweet, metallic smell was overwhelming now, making my eyes water. The whispers were louder tonight, a low, constant murmur from all around me. I felt an intense cold radiating from the wall. As I scrubbed, my sponge snagged on something. I pulled it back, and there, revealed on the wall where the stain had been, was not just a stain. It was a shallow depression in the tile, as if something had been pressed into the ceramic with immense force. And in the center of that depression, almost perfectly formed, was a single, long, dark hair. It was thick, coarse, and looked like it had been embedded in the tile for years. It was unnervingly long. My blood ran cold. My hand trembled, dropping the sponge. I stared at the hair, then at the lingering outline of the face on the wall, then back at the hair. It wasn't just on the wall, it was in the wall. Then, from the stained tiles all around me, the whispers erupted. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were guttural, overlapping sounds, like dozens of distorted voices speaking at once, full of pain and rage and an ancient hunger. The light in the bathroom flickered violently, then died, plunging me into complete darkness. I screamed then, a high-pitched, terrified sound that was instantly swallowed by the cacophony of voices. The air around me became impossibly cold, pressing in, suffocating me. I could feel unseen hands clawing at my clothes, at my hair, pulling at me. The sickly, sweet, metallic odor was so strong it made me gag. I stumbled blindly towards the door, thrashing, my arms flailing, desperate to escape. The voices screamed, impossibly loud now, surrounding me, overwhelming me, tearing at my sanity. I somehow found the doorknob, wrenched it open, and burst out of the bathroom gasping for air. I didn't bother to turn the light back on. I just ran. Out of the restaurant, into the cold night, not looking back. I drove home in a daze, trembling uncontrollably. I never went back to that McDonald's. I quit my job that week, citing unforeseen health issues. I couldn't explain. How do you explain stains that are permanent, smells that cling to your soul, and voices that scream from inside the walls? How do you explain a single, dark hair embedded in ceramic tile? Now, every time I enter a public restroom, especially one with white tiles, I get a cold shiver. I stare at the walls, looking for the telltale dark smudges, listening for the whispers. The image of that hair embedded in the tile and the memory of those screaming voices are burned into my mind. I can still smell that awful, sickly sweet odor. I know there are things hidden in the mundane, in the places we use every day, things that refuse to be scrubbed away. The horror followed me home, and sometimes when I'm alone in a quiet room, I swear I can still hear the faint, distant screams of the bathroom walls. My name is Stella Reed, and I was a McDonald's manager for over 15 years. I started as a crew member right out of high school and worked my way up. My stores were always in bustling urban areas, with a constant flow of customers and a high turnover of staff. You get used to the grind, the constant demands, the organized chaos. Part of my job was training new hires. Young kids, mostly, just starting their first jobs. I saw a lot of them come and go. Most just quit. Some got fired. A few went on to bigger and better things. But there was one new hire, a quiet young man named Damien, who just vanished. And what happened right before he disappeared, what he told me, has haunted me ever since. It was a busy summer evening. The McDonald's was packed with families, teenagers, and tourists. The air was thick with the smell of fries and sugar, and the sounds of laughter and chatter filled the space. I was supervising the front counter, making sure everything ran smoothly. Damien was a new hire, barely 18, assigned to the back kitchen for his first few shifts. He was a quiet kid, a little shy but eager to learn. He seemed perfectly normal, just like any other new employee trying to find their footing. Everything felt routine, just another busy night. Around 8 p.m., the dinner rush was starting to die down a bit. I walked back to the kitchen to check on things. It was hot, noisy, and still bustling. I saw Damien by the fryers, looking a little overwhelmed but doing his job. As I approached him, he glanced at me and I noticed something in his eyes. A flicker of fear, or maybe just confusion. He looked tired, paler than usual. He seemed to have an unusual stillness about him, a quietness that felt wrong. My instincts, after years of managing young staff, were already beginning to scream that something was wrong. This wasn't just a tired new hire. This was different. "Everything okay, Damien?" I asked, putting a hand on his shoulder. "You look a little green." He jumped, startled by my touch. He looked around as if making sure no one else was listening. "Stella," he whispered, his voice shaky, I keep hearing things." My brow furrowed. "Hearing what, Damien? The fryers? The grill?" It was a noisy kitchen. It was easy to get disoriented. He shook his head, his eyes wide. "No, not those. Whispers, from the walls, from the freezer." He paused, lowering his voice even further. "They're calling my name." My blood ran cold. Whispers from the walls? Calling his name? I tried to rationalize it. First job jitters, maybe too much caffeine, or just the stress of a busy kitchen. "Damien, it's probably just the building settling, or the ventilation system. It can make weird noises." I tried to sound reassuring, but a prickle of unease started to crawl up my spine. He wouldn't be comforted. "No, Stella, it's not. It's voices, and I think they're trying to tell me something. Something about the freezer." He pointed a trembling finger towards the walk-in freezer door, a heavy, insulated metal door at the back of the kitchen. My heart began to pound. I had worked in that kitchen for years. I knew that freezer. Nothing was special about it. But the look on Damien's face, the genuine terror in his eyes, stopped me from dismissing him completely. "What about the freezer, Damien?" I asked, my voice softer now. "What are they saying?" He looked terrified, his gaze fixed on the freezer door. They say it's not empty. They say there are others, waiting." He paused, his voice barely a breath. "And they want me to open it." My stomach clenched. Open the freezer? What did that even mean? The freezer contained frozen burger patties, fries, chicken nuggets, standard inventory. My mind raced, trying to figure out if it was a prank or if he was having some kind of mental break. But the sheer chilling sound of his voice and the way he clung to my arm told me this wasn't a joke. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt heavy, charged with an unseen presence. I could feel a faint chill, even in the sweltering heat of the kitchen, coming from the direction of the freezer. "Damien, no one is in the freezer," I said firmly, trying to regain control of the situation. "It's full of food." I tried to pull him away, but his grip on my arm was surprisingly strong. He was trembling all over. "No," he cried, his voice suddenly louder, more frantic. "They're there. I hear them. They're getting louder." He looked desperate, almost manic. His eyes darted to the freezer door. "They want me to join them." Then, from behind the thick metal door of the walk-in freezer, I heard it. A faint, muffled scratching sound. It was distinct. Not the hum of the compressor, not the rattling of the shelves. It was like something was trying to claw its way out. And beneath that scratching, very faint, almost imperceptible, was a low, mournful moan. It sounded like it was coming from deep within the freezer, a sound of profound despair. My blood ran cold. I stared at the freezer door. The metallic handle seemed to shimmer faintly in the harsh kitchen light. I felt an intense cold radiating from it, cutting through the heat of the grill. I could feel a presence behind that door, something vast and ancient and utterly terrifying. My vision started to blur at the edges, my body shaking with a terror I had never known. The kitchen, usually a place of organized chaos, became a silent, terrifying void around us. I was paralyzed. Damien pulled his arm from my grasp. His eyes were wide, unblinking, fixed on the freezer door. A strange, vacant smile spread across his face, not one of happiness but of eerie calm. He started to walk towards it, slowly, deliberately. Each step was silent, almost gliding. "Damien, no!" I screamed, finally finding my voice. I lunged forward, trying to grab him, to stop him, but he was too fast. He reached the freezer door, his hand already on the heavy metal handle. Just as my fingers brushed his shoulder, he turned the handle. The heavy door swung open with a soft, ominous whoosh, and inside, it wasn't just frozen food. My eyes widened in horror. The freezer was vast, impossibly larger than it should have been, and it wasn't filled with burger patties and fries. It was filled with a swirling, churning void of absolute blackness, deeper than any shadow, colder than any ice, and from within that void, thousands upon thousands of pale, skeletal hands, impossibly long and thin, reached out. They waved and writhed, beckoning, pulling, and from that endless blackness, a symphony of whispers, moans, and pleas erupted, a horrifying chorus that screamed Damien's name, pulling him in. The metallic tang of cold earth mixed with the smell of death and decay. Damien stepped into the void. Without a word, without a sound, he just walked into the swirling darkness, his eyes still holding that vacant, eerie smile. The skeletal hands reached for him, embraced him, and pulled him deeper into the impossible blackness. The heavy freezer door swung shut with a muffled thud, cutting off the chorus of voices and the sight of the swirling void. I stood there, trembling, gasping for air, pointing a shaking finger at the closed freezer door. My co-workers rushed over, drawn by my scream. "What happened, Stella? Where's Damien?" He went inside," I stammered, my voice hoarse. "The freezer, it wasn't empty." They opened the freezer. It was exactly as it should be. Rows and rows of frozen burger patties, fries, chicken nuggets, cold, sterile, and utterly normal. No void, no skeletal hands, no Damien. My co-workers looked at me with worried, confused expressions. They thought I was having a psychotic break. Damien was never seen again. The police were called. A missing person report was filed. They searched everywhere. But he was simply gone. No trace, no explanation. They dismissed my frantic story as a manager under stress. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. Now, every time I see a walk-in freezer door, a cold dread washes over me. I hear the phantom whispers, the scratching, the mournful moans. I see those skeletal hands, reaching from the endless black. I never manage a McDonald's anymore. I couldn't. The thought of that freezer, the memory of Damien walking into the impossible, is burned into my soul. I wonder if he's still in there, one of the others, waiting. And sometimes, when I'm alone in a quiet room, I swear I can hear a faint, distant whisper calling my name, inviting me to open the door and join the lost. The horror followed me home, and it's always waiting, always calling, always whispering from the deepest, coldest places. My name is Matthew Grant. I was a district manager for McDonald's for 15 years, overseeing about 10 different stores in a large urban area. My job meant a lot of driving, a lot of meetings, and a lot of dealing with various issues, from staffing problems to equipment malfunctions. I was always on the go, always problem solving. I saw a lot of different stores, met a lot of different people. Most of the issues were predictable, solvable, but there was one store, an older one in the downtown core, that had a problem I couldn't solve, couldn't even begin to understand. It involved the play place, a usually joyful space for kids, but at this particular store it became something else entirely. It was a Monday morning, early before the breakfast rush. I was making my rounds, checking in on my stores. This particular McDonald's was known for its large, brightly colored indoor play place, a sprawling plastic maze with slides and ball pits. It was usually full of happy children during the day. As I walked through the quiet, empty dining area, the smell of fresh coffee and disinfectant filled the air. The sun was just starting to peek through the windows, casting long shadows. Everything felt normal, routine. I walked past the entrance to the play place. It was dark inside, the lights still off. The silence from within was unusual. Usually, even empty, the plastic structure seemed to hum with a residual energy, a faint echo of children's laughter. But today, it was utterly still, profoundly quiet. A prickle of unease started to crawl up my spine. My instincts, after years of knowing these stores, were already beginning to scream that something was wrong. This wasn't just a dark play place. This was different. I turned on the lights. The bright fluorescent tubes hummed to life, illuminating the colorful plastic slides and tunnels. Still, nothing seemed out of place. No trash, no broken equipment, just an eerie stillness. I decided to walk through it, as I often did, to make sure it was clean and safe before opening. I climbed into the plastic structure, the hard plastic cold beneath my hands. The air inside felt heavy, somehow stagnant, despite the ventilation system. The faint smell of stale popcorn and plastic was normal, but there was something else too. A faint, almost imperceptible scent of something metallic, like old pennies. As I crawled through a low tunnel, I heard it. A faint, almost childish giggle. My head snapped up. I froze, listening intently. Nothing. Just the hum of the fluorescent lights. I told myself it was just an echo, or maybe the sounds of the city filtering in. This store was in a busy area. I tried to rationalize it, to dismiss the prickle of unease. I continued my inspection, moving deeper into the maze. Then I heard it again. A distinct whisper, very soft, right next to my ear. It sounded like a child's voice, muffled, saying something I couldn't quite make out. It was a high-pitched, sibilant sound. My heart jumped. I spun around, hitting my head on a low plastic beam. Nothing. Just empty plastic tubes stretching into the darkness. The air around me suddenly felt icy cold, raising goosebumps on my arms despite the warmth of the room. It lasted only a moment. Then the warmth returned. Over the next few weeks, these incidents became more frequent, more bold. The giggles became clearer, sometimes accompanied by the sound of small, quick footsteps on the plastic. I would find toys moved, or a stray ball from the ball pit sitting on top of a slide, perfectly balanced. The whispers grew clearer, sometimes sounding like names being called, always from within the play place, always when it was empty. My employees, especially the younger ones, started to report strange things too. They'd hear voices, see shadows moving in their peripheral vision, or feel cold spots. We'd check the security cameras, but they showed nothing. Just empty plastic, still as death. My store manager, Brenda, thought it was just the new night shift employees trying to scare each other. But I knew. I knew what I was hearing, what I was feeling. One morning, it reached its climax. I was at the store early, alone, waiting for the staff to arrive. I had just finished my coffee and was heading to the office when I heard it from the play place. Not a giggle, not a whisper. This time, it was a child's scream, a raw, piercing sound of pure terror. My blood ran cold. I stumbled, nearly dropping my clipboard. I rushed to the entrance of the play place, flicking on the lights. The bright lights illuminated the empty structure, but the scream still echoed in my ears. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Is anyone in there?" Silence. A heavy, oppressive silence. Then, a small red ball from the ball pit slowly rolled out of a tunnel and stopped right at my feet. It was covered in a thin, slimy, dark residue, and from that same tunnel, a voice emanated. It wasn't a child's voice this time. It was a low, guttural growl, impossibly deep, yet with a faint, childlike inflection. "You are next." My hands flew to my mouth, stifling another scream. I could feel an intense cold radiating from the tunnel, as if all the warmth had been sucked out of the room. The air around the tunnel shimmered faintly, a distortion in the plastic. My eyes darted around the empty play place, but there was nothing there. Just me, the ball, and the growling voice from the dark tunnel. The terror was absolute, paralyzing. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The words, "You are next," echoed in my head, over and over, chilling me to the bone. Then, from deep within the play place, I heard it again. The child's scream, but this time it sounded distorted, stretched, like a recording played backwards, full of unimaginable pain. And then the sound of tearing plastic, wet and sickening, followed by a series of wet, smacking sounds as if something was being devoured. The sickly sweet, metallic odor intensified, overwhelming my senses. I finally broke free of my paralysis. I turned and ran, scrambling out of the store, not bothering to lock up. I didn't stop until I was in my car, trembling uncontrollably. I drove away, leaving the store behind. I resigned from my district manager position a week later. I couldn't go back to that store, couldn't face the play place. I avoid any McDonald's with an indoor play area now. The memory of that child's scream, followed by that guttural growl and the sound of tearing plastic, is etched into my soul. I can still see that red ball, slimy and dark, at my feet. I still hear that voice, "You are next." What was it? What was in that play place? Why did it target children? I don't know, and I don't want to. But I know that what should be a place of joy can sometimes hide an unspeakable horror. The horror followed me home, and sometimes, when I'm alone, I still hear a faint giggle, just at the edge of hearing, coming from empty spaces, reminding me that I am next. My name is Tessa Morgan, and I was a McDonald's cashier for nearly a decade. My store was a small, quiet one, nestled in a suburban strip mall. It catered mostly to local families and retirees. My shifts were usually daytime, so I saw the usual flow of happy customers. The smell of fresh coffee and pastries was often in the air, a comforting aroma. I enjoyed the friendly chatter and the predictable rhythm of the day. It was a simple, easy job. But then, a new customer started coming in, and her presence began to unravel everything I thought I knew about the mundane world of fast food. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The lunch rush had just ended, and the store was peacefully quiet. I was wiping down the counter, humming along to the soft music playing over the speakers. The sun streamed in through the large windows, making the restaurant feel bright and welcoming. Everything felt normal, calm, routine. Then the door opened and a woman walked in. She was elderly, perhaps in her late 70s, dressed in old-fashioned heavy winter clothing, even though it was a mild spring day. A thick, dark scarf was wrapped tightly around her neck, and a wide-brimmed hat obscured much of her face. She walked slowly, deliberately, her movements stiff. She had an unusual stillness about her, a quietness that wasn't quite right. My instincts, after years of dealing with all kinds of customers, were already beginning to scream that something was wrong. This wasn't just an eccentric old lady. This was different. She approached the counter, her steps making no sound on the tiled floor. Her face was mostly hidden by the hat and scarf, but I could see her eyes. They were a milky, clouded blue, but they seemed to fix on me with an unsettling intensity. She didn't speak. She just stood there, staring. "Welcome to McDonald's," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "What can I get for you today?" She slowly raised a gloved hand, her fingers trembling slightly. She pointed, not at the menu, but at a spot just behind me, above the drive-through window. He is waiting," she whispered, her voice a dry, papery rustle, surprisingly clear despite her age. "He is waiting for you to see." My blood ran cold. My head snapped around. I looked at the spot she was pointing to. It was just the wall. Nothing there, just plain white wall. I looked back at her, confusion warring with a growing sense of dread. "Ma'am, there's nothing there," I said, my voice softer now, more cautious. "Who is waiting?" She didn't answer my question. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step closer to the counter, her cloudy eyes still fixed on me with that unnerving intensity. A faint, almost imperceptible smell, like dry dust and ancient, decaying flowers, wafted from her. "He comes when the lights are low," she whispered, her voice gaining a strange, insistent urgency. "He comes for what is taken, and he knows what you hide." My heart began to pound. What was she talking about? What was taken? What did I hide? I felt a sudden, inexplicable surge of panic. It was like she was speaking in riddles, but riddles that held a profound, personal threat. I tried to look away from her eyes, but they held me, drawing me into their milky depths. I suddenly felt cold, colder than the mild spring day outside. This wasn't just an eccentric old lady. This was something else. Pure, unadulterated fear started to bloom in my chest. I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, caught in the grip of her gaze and her unsettling words. The cheerful music playing over the speakers sounded distorted, like a mockery. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice barely audible. My hand instinctively reached for the emergency button under the counter, but I couldn't bring myself to press it. She smiled then, a thin, grim line that didn't reach her cloudy eyes. "He sees what is taken," she repeated, her voice a chilling whisper. "He sees the things that are missing, and he will find them. He will find you." Then she turned. Just as slowly as she had walked in, she walked out. The door closed silently behind her, leaving me standing there, trembling, clutching the counter. My coworker, Anthony, came out from the back a few minutes later, asking if everything was okay. I told him it was just a strange customer, but I couldn't shake the feeling of those cloudy eyes, that dry, papery voice, and her chilling pronouncements. She started coming in every day after that, always at the same time, always asking the same cryptic questions, always pointing to the same empty spot above the drive-through window. "Has he shown himself yet? Did you hear his whisper? He is looking for what you took." I started to dread her visits. My other coworkers noticed my increasing anxiety. They thought I was just stressed, but they didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel the weight of her impossible, accusatory gaze. One afternoon, as she stood at the counter, her cloudy eyes fixed on me, the store was empty. The sun had begun to set, casting long orange shadows. The cheerful music seemed to falter, skipping a beat. "He is close now," she whispered, her voice almost a cackle. "He is almost here, for what is lost, for what is hidden." As she spoke, I felt a sudden, intense cold. Not just a chill in the air, but a cold that seemed to emanate from the very spot she was pointing to. Above the drive-through window, where the plain white wall had always been, a faint distortion appeared, like the air itself was rippling, and then, slowly, a form began to coalesce. It was dark, indistinct, like a shadow made of deeper shadows, but it was undeniably there. It was tall, impossibly thin, with long, shadowy limbs that seemed to stretch and shift, and from its place, 2 pinpricks of glowing, malevolent red light appeared, fixing on me with an awful intensity. My breath hitched in my throat, my body locked in place, gripped by an absolute, paralyzing terror. This was him, the one she was talking about. He wasn't just a shadow. He was a presence, a predator. The smell of dry dust and decaying flowers intensified, overwhelming my senses, making me gag. The whispers started then, not from the woman, but from the shadow itself. Not words, but a low, sibilant hiss that seemed to enter my mind directly, bypassing my ears. It was demanding, insistent. Mine. Give it back. Mine. What did I take? I whimpered, my voice a barely audible squeak, my vision blurred at the edges, my body shaking uncontrollably. The old woman let out a soft, dry laugh. "Your memories," she rasped. "You took his memories of this place. You buried them, and now he wants them back." Then the shadowy figure lunged, not physically, but spiritually. I felt an invisible force, cold and probing, slam into my mind. It was trying to pry something out, to force its way in. An intense, agonizing pain shot through my head, a pressure so immense I thought my skull would burst. Images flashed through my mind, dark corners, forgotten faces, unsettling sounds, all things I had subconsciously dismissed or forgotten from my time at McDonald's. It was pulling them out, claiming them as its own. I screamed then, a loud, primal shriek of pure agony and terror. I fell to the floor, clutching my head, writhing as the invisible force tore at my memories. The old woman stood there, watching, her face obscured, but her milky eyes glinting with a chilling satisfaction. My co-worker, Anthony, found me convulsing on the floor, foaming at the mouth. He called 911. I don't remember much of what happened after that. I woke up in a hospital, confused, disoriented, with a throbbing headache. The doctors said it was a severe panic attack brought on by stress. They prescribed medication. I never went back to that McDonald's. I quit my job. The memory of that shadowy figure, those glowing red eyes, and the agonizing pain of my memories being ripped from me is etched into my soul. I still get crippling headaches, especially when the lights are low, and sometimes, when I'm alone, I feel a cold, probing touch in my mind, a phantom whisper demanding, "Give it back." I don't know what I took. I don't know what memories I buried, but I know he's still out there, searching, waiting, and I know that the things we forget, the truths we ignore, can come back to haunt us in the most terrifying ways. The horror followed me home, and it's always trying to reclaim what it believes is its own. My name is Christopher Ward. I was a night auditor for McDonald's for 10 years. My job was less about serving customers and more about paperwork, reconciling the day's earnings and preparing the books for the morning manager. My shifts were usually from midnight to 8 a.m., meaning I was alone in the store for most of that time. The store itself was a small, older location in a quiet residential area. The nights were usually peaceful, just the hum of the computers and the distant sounds of the city. It was a methodical, quiet job, perfect for someone like me who preferred solitude. But then, a series of strange errors started appearing in the system, and what I discovered felt like a breach in reality itself. It was a cold, still night in early December. The Christmas decorations were up, casting a festive glow, but the store was empty and silent. I was in the small office, surrounded by glowing computer screens and stacks of paperwork. The smell of printer ink and old coffee hung in the air. The only sounds were the soft whir of the computer fans and my own breathing. Everything felt normal, calm, routine. As I was going through the sales reports, I noticed something odd. A transaction that didn't make sense. A single order for a McMystery burger at 3:17 a.m. It had no price, no register record, and no corresponding inventory deduction. It was just there, a phantom entry in the system. My first thought was that it was a system glitch, or perhaps a coworker had entered a joke order and forgotten to delete it. I tried to correct it, but the entry wouldn't go away. It just stubbornly remained, a small, impossible anomaly. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just a system error, this was different. I paused, staring at the screen, a prickle of unease crawling up my spine. The next night, I found another one. McMystery fries, this time at 2:45 a.m. Again, no price, no record, no inventory change, and the previous McMystery burger was still there, unchanged, unremovable. My heart gave a little jump. 2 strange entries? This was more than a glitch. I ran diagnostics, checked the network logs, but found nothing. It was like these entries were being generated out of thin air, from outside the system itself. The air in the office started to feel colder, even though the heating was on. Over the next few weeks, the phantom orders escalated. McMystery shake, McMystery nuggets, McMystery pie. They appeared almost every night, always between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., always with no record, no price, and no customer. They were unremovable, accumulating in the system, a growing list of impossible transactions. Each one seemed to emanate a faint, metallic odor, like old blood mixed with ozone, even though I was just looking at a computer screen. The more they appeared, the more paranoid I became. I started checking the security cameras, but they always showed the same thing: an empty store, silent and still. Yet these orders kept appearing. My manager, Ms. Davies, thought I was seeing things. She said the system was old and prone to errors. But I knew what I was seeing. One night, it reached its climax. It was 3 a.m. I was sitting at my desk, staring at the screen, dreading the next entry. The store was profoundly silent. The faint hum of the computer fan sounded like a sinister whisper. Suddenly, a new entry appeared. Not a McMystery item this time. It simply read, "Order, Christopher Ward," and beneath it, a single line, "Status, awaiting pickup." My blood ran cold. My own name, my own order. My breath hitched in my throat. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. What did it mean? Awaiting pickup? My stomach clenched with an ice-cold dread. It felt like a trap, a lure. The metallic ozone smell filled the small office, thick and suffocating. I felt an intense, unseen gaze on me, pressing in from the empty store outside the office. My vision started to blur at the edges, my body shaking with a terror I had never known. I was paralyzed, utterly helpless. Then, from the speaker of the drive-through radio, which was usually silent at this hour, a faint, static hiss erupted. And through that static, a voice. It was deep, guttural, yet oddly artificial, like a computer trying to mimic human speech. "Order for Christopher Ward, ready for pickup." Each word was drawn out, distorted, chilling me to the bone. My hands flew to my mouth, stifling a scream. I could feel an intense cold radiating from the radio speaker, as if all the warmth had been sucked out of the room. The static intensified, crackling with an unseen energy. My eyes darted around the office, but there was nothing there. Just me, the computer screen, and the voice from the radio. The terror was absolute, paralyzing. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The words, "ready for pickup," echoed in my head, over and over, chilling me to the bone. Then the static on the radio intensified, reaching a piercing shriek, and through that shriek, the computer screen flickered wildly. The "Order, Christopher Ward" line changed. Beneath it, a new line appeared, slowly, word by terrifying word. "Pickup location. Behind the counter. Now." My breath caught. Behind the counter? My eyes darted to the office door, then to the main counter visible through the glass. It was dark, empty, terrifying. The radio voice distorted, becoming a cacophony of overlapping screams and hisses, urging me, pulling me, demanding I go to the counter. I finally broke free of my paralysis. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore through the silence. I scrambled out of my chair, knocking it over. I didn't bother to log off, didn't bother to turn off the lights. I burst out of the office, into the empty store, and ran out the front door, not looking back. I didn't stop until I was miles away, trembling uncontrollably. I never went back to that McDonald's. I quit my job that day, leaving a frantic, rambling message for Ms. Davies about phantom orders and voices from the system. She probably thought I had lost my mind, but I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. Now, every time I hear a computer beep or a radio hiss, a cold dread washes over me. I avoid fast food restaurants, especially at night. The memory of "Order, Christopher Ward," and the voice from the radio demanding I pick it up is etched into my soul. I can still hear it, still feel the cold, probing presence. What was that order? What was waiting for me behind the counter? I don't know, and I truly never want to find out. But I know that some communications are not meant to be heard by individual minds, but by entire species, and that sometimes the system itself can become a terrifying gateway to something far beyond our understanding. The horror followed me home, and it's always waiting for me to pick up my order. My name is Logan Foster. I worked as a security guard for over 10 years now. Most of my nights were spent watching security monitors. My route took me through empty warehouses, quiet office buildings, and a few fast food places. One of them was a McDonald's on the edge of town. It was a 24-hour place, but after 1 a.m. it was mostly a ghost town. I've seen a lot of strange things on my cameras. People doing weird dances, arguments, even a few minor break-ins, but usually it was just bored teens or tired travelers. You learn to recognize the patterns of the night, but what I saw that night wasn't human, and it made me question every shadow I've walked through since. It was a chilly Saturday night, about 3:30 a.m. The kind of night where the air felt heavy and still. I was sitting in my patrol car, parked across the street from the McDonald's. I was watching the screens on my dashboard. Inside, I could see a young kid named Tyler working the counter. He looked tired. The store was empty. The parking lot was mostly clear, just a few scattered puddles reflecting the neon glow. I was sipping my cold coffee, trying to stay awake, when a car pulled into the drive-thru. It was a beat-up, dark blue sedan. Nothing special. It pulled up to the speaker, and Tyler, as usual, chimed in, "Welcome to McDonald's. Can I take your order?" I watched the car. It sat there for a long moment. Then, through the speaker, I heard a low, raspy voice. Too deep. It sounded like someone trying to talk after waking up from a long sleep. "Quarter pounder. No pickles. Large fry. Coke." Tyler nodded, typing it in. The car pulled forward to the window. This is where it got weird. Tyler got the food ready, put it in the bag. He held out the bag and the card reader, but the driver didn't move. The car was just sitting there, engine idling. The driver's side window was still up. Tyler looked confused. He waited. He tapped on the window lightly. Nothing. The driver, from what I could see on my blurry camera, was just a dark shape behind the tinted glass. Tyler frowned, then tried to open the window with his hand, thinking maybe the customer was asleep. It didn't budge. My stomach twisted. This wasn't normal. Tyler's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. I could see it in his face. He kept tapping. "Sir? Hello? Your order?" His voice was getting louder. The car just sat there, silent, unmoving. The engine was humming low. No lights were on inside the car. No movement at all. It was like a statue. Then, slowly, very slowly, the driver's side window began to roll down. Not all the way, just a few inches. Tyler leaned in closer, trying to see. I watched it all unfold on my monitor, a cold dread coiling in my gut. What I saw next made me almost drop my coffee. Through the small gap in the window, a hand reached out. But it wasn't a hand. It was too long, too pale, with fingers that seemed to have too many joints. They were thin, almost like white twigs. It wasn't skin, not really. It looked like bone, stretched thin with something like ancient parchment over it. The hand reached for the food, not the card reader. It snatched the bag with a surprising speed, pulling it back inside the car. No money, no payment, nothing. Tyler gasped, stumbling back from the window. He dropped the card reader. His face was pure white. He was staring into the car. And as he stared, I saw it too. What I thought was just a dark shape in the driver's seat began to move. It wasn't a person. It was a mass of shadows, shifting and swirling. And from within that darkness I saw a flash of something reflective. Something like eyes, but not eyes. Too many of them. Glimmering, cold, like polished obsidian. Then a sound came through Tyler's headset, which he had forgotten to turn off. A wet, slurping sound. It was coming from the car. And another sound, like something ripping apart. Something wet and meaty. My blood ran cold. Whatever was in that car was eating the food, right there, quickly. And it sounded wrong, inhuman. Tyler, frozen in place, pointed a shaking finger at the car, trying to speak, but no words came out. The car's interior was still a black void, but I could feel it, even through the cameras. A heavy, malevolent presence. The window started to roll back up, slowly, deliberately. But before it fully closed, I saw one more thing. A small, dark stain began to spread on the window glass, like thick, black oil. It wasn't rain. It wasn't mud. It looked like something had leaked from inside. The car's engine suddenly roared, a deep, guttural sound that shook the quiet night. The tires squealed as it peeled out of the drive-thru. It didn't go on to the main road. Instead, it swerved sharply into the back alley behind McDonald's, disappearing into the darkness between the dumpsters. It was gone. Just like that. Tyler collapsed against the counter, breathing hard, his eyes wide and vacant. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. I got out of my car and hurried over. By the time I got inside, he was shaking violently. He couldn't speak, just pointing at the drive-thru window. The black stain was still there, a sticky, dark smear on the glass. It smelled faintly metallic, like old pennies and something else, something I couldn't place, something foul. I tried to clean it. It wouldn't come off easily. It smeared, sticky, and black. I never saw that car again. Tyler quit that night. He wouldn't even finish his shift. He never explained what he truly saw in that car, but his face told me everything. He swore he saw shapes, too many of them, moving in the dark. That night still haunts me. Every dark car that passes, every unusual silence on my security feeds. I find myself checking the alleyways, searching the shadows for that dark sedan. I see things in the corner of my eye now, shapes that aren't quite right, and I wonder, what kind of hunger drives something like that to a McDonald's at 3:30 in the morning? What was it? Truly eating in there? And did it ever come back when no one was watching? My name is Brandon Pierce, and I was a McDonald's maintenance worker for almost 5 years. My job was primarily focused on the exterior of the buildings, fixing broken signs, cleaning the drive-through lanes, power washing the parking lots, and landscaping. I spent a lot of time alone, often at night, making sure everything outside looked perfect. Most of my work was straightforward, dealing with ordinary wear and tear. But there was one particular McDonald's, an older one on the outskirts of a rural town, where the problems weren't just about broken lights or overgrown bushes. They were about something deeply unsettling that was trying to get in. It was a chilly, moonless night in late autumn. The wind rustled through the dry leaves on the ground, making a constant, whispering sound. I was power washing the drive-through lane, the roar of the machine echoing in the vast silence of the empty parking lot. The McDonald's stood alone, surrounded by dark fields, far from any other businesses. The air smelled of damp earth and the faint, sweet scent of decaying leaves. Everything felt normal, just another night of outdoor maintenance. As I worked, the powerful jet of water cutting through grime, I noticed something odd on the drive-through speaker box. A series of strange, faint scratches. They weren't graffiti. They looked like deep gouges, almost like claw marks etched into the hard plastic. They formed an irregular pattern, almost like a symbol, but one I didn't recognize. My first thought was that some bored teenagers had tried to vandalize it. Annoying, but common. I tried to blast them away with the power washer, but they were too deep. They stubbornly remained, a small, impossible anomaly. My instincts were screaming that something was wrong. This wasn't just vandalism, this was different. I paused, the roar of the power washer suddenly silent, and stared at the marks. They seemed to pulse faintly under the beam of my headlamp, almost imperceptibly. I shrugged it off as best I could, making a mental note to tell the manager. I moved on to cleaning the large illuminated McDonald's sign. As I wiped down the plastic arches, I found more marks. This time, they were thinner, almost like scratches from something very sharp, running along the bottom edge of the golden M. They weren't as deep as the speaker box marks, but they were definitely there, and they seemed to mirror the pattern on the speaker box. My heart gave a little jump. 2 places? In the same night? This was more than a coincidence. I ran my gloved finger over the marks. They felt unnervingly sharp. The air around the sign started to feel colder, even though I was wearing a thick jacket. Over the next few weeks, the marks escalated. They appeared on the windows, not just fingerprints, but distinct, elongated smears, as if something with very long fingers had been pressing against the glass. They appeared on the brick facade, not just dirt, but dark, almost oily smudges that clung to the porous surface. Each one seemed to emanate a faint, metallic odor, like old blood mixed with something sickly sweet, like decaying meat, even though they were just marks on a building. The more they appeared, the more paranoid I became. I started checking the security cameras, but they always showed the same thing. An empty parking lot, silent and still. Yet these marks kept appearing. My manager, Mr. Jenkins, thought I was just seeing things, or that it was the work of persistent vandals. But I knew what I was seeing. One moonless night, it reached its climax. It was 2 a.m. I was in the back parking lot repairing a broken fence post near the dumpster area. The store was dark and silent. The wind was a low moan in the trees. I was alone, working by the beam of my headlamp. Suddenly, a series of rapid, rhythmic thumps erupted from the back wall of the restaurant just beside the dumpster. Not the gentle settling of an old building. This was heavy, deliberate, like something was repeatedly hitting the brick with a large, soft object. My blood ran cold. My breath hitched in my throat. I stared at the dark wall, my hand tightening on my wrench. What was that? The thumping intensified, growing louder, more frantic, and with it, a low, guttural growl emanating from behind the wall. It wasn't the sound of an animal. It was deeper, more resonant, filled with a terrible hunger. It sounded like it was coming from inside the wall, as if something huge was trapped within the brick and trying to break out. The metallic, sickly sweet odor filled the air, thick and suffocating. I felt an intense, unseen gaze on me, pressing in from the darkness. My vision started to blur at the edges, my body shaking with a terror I had never known. I was paralyzed, utterly helpless. Then the thumping stopped. The growling ceased. A profound, absolute silence descended. My ears strained, listening for anything. Nothing, just the wind. But then, from the brick wall, right where the thumping had been, a single, deep crack appeared. It wasn't there a moment ago. It started small, then spiderwebbed outwards, silently, unnervingly, and from within that crack, a faint, pulsing red light appeared. It was dull, like a dying ember, but it was unmistakably there, deep within the brick. And as I stared at it, the crack widened, slowly, deliberately. My hands flew to my mouth, stifling a scream. I could feel an intense cold radiating from the wall, as if all the warmth had been sucked out of the entire parking lot. The air around the crack shimmered faintly, a distortion in the darkness. My eyes darted around the empty parking lot, but there was nothing there. Just me, the wall, and the pulsing red light from the deepening crack. The terror was absolute, paralyzing. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My mind screamed at me to run, but my body wouldn't obey. The image of that red light, that growing crack, echoed in my head, over and over, chilling me to the bone. Then, a new sound. A low, wet squelching, coming from inside the wall, from behind the crack. And the crack itself widened further, revealing more of the pulsing red light, and something else. A flicker of movement. Something dark, sinuous, and impossibly thin seemed to writhe within the opening. It was reaching, probing, trying to find its way out. The sickly sweet, metallic odor became overwhelming, making me gag. I finally broke free of my paralysis. I screamed, a raw, guttural sound that tore through the silence. I dropped my wrench, scrambled over the broken fence, not caring about the splinters, and ran. I ran across the dark fields, not looking back, not stopping until I reached the highway. I drove home in a daze, trembling uncontrollably. I never went back to that McDonald's. I quit my job that day, leaving a frantic, rambling message for Mr. Jenkins about something in the wall and red lights. He probably thought I had lost my mind. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I heard. Now, every time I see a brick wall, especially an old one, a cold dread washes over me. I avoid isolated buildings, especially at night. The memory of that pulsing red light, that deepening crack, and the unseen thing writhing within is etched into my soul. I can still hear the growl, still feel the cold, probing presence. What was trying to get out? What was making those marks, hitting that wall? I don't know, and I truly never want to find out. But I know that some walls are not meant to contain what is behind them, and that sometimes the exterior of a place holds secrets far more terrifying than anything inside. The horror followed me home, and it's always trying to break out. Some places are cheap because the previous guests never lived to leave bad reviews.